It is Black History Month. Can you guys hear me over this? Okay. So, you guys said it correctly. This month is Black History Month, and for 28 days a year, our country likes to acknowledge a kind of formulaic definition of what is Black history. It is usually begun with a discussion of slavery and concluded with this simplified version of what the Civil Rights Movement was. But, as we all know, there is no box in which Black history can be confined. In itself, the Civil Rights Movement has no single event that changed the course of history, no single person who achieved change. It was a nationwide effort that involved people from every walk of life. Our own town of Decatur had a pivotal role in this story that has long remained hidden in our history. As students of Decatur High School and Decatur citizens, we have dedicated the past year to uncovering and sharing that story. Today we share it with you in hopes that you can share it with others in your lives. This morning, you will get to meet the people who helped transform the very nature of our city and open the doors in all our futures. Up until now, we have not told many of you what event exactly took place in our city. The story which brought us to this moment begins in 1960, when Decatur was known as Klan Country. If Addie Taylor could come up.
All right, guys, let's raise your hands if you know at least a little bit about the life of Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, how many of you guys know that he had a trial and was sentenced in Decatur, Georgia, on this very city block that ended up being a turning point in the Civil Rights Movement? Okay, a couple of people, awesome. So let's talk about it. So at the corner of McDonough and Trinity Avenues in Decatur, which is right there where that new apartment building was built, just across the street from Chick-fil-A, used to be the DeKalb County building, which had courts and a small jail. And there, Martin Luther King Jr. was tried and illegally sentenced to 4 months of hard labor in prison for protesting. This trial became a massive turning point in the Civil Rights Movement as the Kennedys intervened on King's behalf, and the power of Black voters in the South shifted a presidential election and changed the U.S. forever. On May 4, 1960, King was pulled over on Clifton Road for driving with an expired license plate. However, he was also likely pulled over because he was driving with a white woman in the passenger seat. She was on her way to cancer treatment at Emory Hospital. So King had to appear in court the next day, right here, in Decatur, with Judge Oscar Mitchell, who was notoriously racist, and the case was dismissed, thankfully, because he already submitted an application for a new license plate. But he was driving with an Alabama driver's license because he just moved to Atlanta from Montgomery a few months earlier, and he was put on probation for it. Then, the Atlanta student movement began organizing boycotts and sit-ins, and in October, King joined them at Rich's, a popular department store, to desegregate the lunch counter. He was arrested with dozens of others for trespassing and sent to the Fulton County Jail. Everyone at Rich's was released in exchange for a temporary end to the sentence because the Atlanta mayor at the time was keen to negotiate. But MLK remained in jail because of being arrested, he violated the terms of his probation. He was ordered to appear again in the courtroom of Judge Oscar Mitchell, a minute's walk from where we're all sitting. Coretta Scott King feared for his life because DeKalb County, including Decatur, was Klan country. In front of an anxiously packed courtroom, under the looming presence of a Confederate flag, the judge sentenced King to 4 months of heavy labor in prison, denied him bond, which was later found illegal, and King was thrown into the building's jail. This is the court book from the time that shows King, his age, gender, race, and then his charge of violation of probation, and you can see next to it, the empty columns show that he was charged, he had no bond, which was considered illegal, and then it was on October 25th, 1960. So he was thrown into this very jail and overnight, and it was actually the first time he was ever in jail overnight during the Civil Rights Movement. Then at 4 a.m., he was taken to Reidsville State Prison in the back of a police wagon. King supporters, desperate to help him and infuriated by the treatment he had received, reached out to Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, who were running against each other for president. Nixon, the Republican, remained silent, but John F. Kennedy reached out to Coretta Scott King, and Robert F. Kennedy called Judge Oscar Mitchell. MLK was released under bond the next day, pending the appeal of his case. King's father, head pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and civil rights movement leaders all over the country immediately urged black voters to switch their votes from Nixon to Kennedy. In the previous election, 60% of black voters had voted Republican, but that November in 1960, the number dropped to 30%, and 70% Democratic votes went to Kennedy. Kennedy won the presidential election by less than 1 vote per precinct, and without the support of the civil rights movement, he never would have won. So this is how Decatur played a key part in the civil rights movement and a turning point in American history.
So thank you to Abby for giving this great historical story and context of what happened here in our city. And although our journey into the civil rights movement begins, and into the civil rights movement in Decatur begins with Dr. King's arrest, the 4 people that we're going to hear from today have made their own history in Decatur during the 1960s, far beyond the singular event. So thank you everybody for coming to listen to these amazing people today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Genesis Reddix.
Good morning.
My name is MLK, as I said earlier. Okay, yes. Today we have the privilege to speak to 4 influential figures that all contributed to the civil rights movement in a number of ways.
Firstly, we have Mayor Marina Elizabeth Wilson, who's in the red. She is the first African-American mayor of the city of Decatur. She also advocated for an integration. And she also advocated for the integration of local public establishments such as the Decatur Library and schools throughout her career. We also have Judge Clarence C. Liggett, who is with us today. From the DeKalb courtroom and defeated the man who sentenced Dr. King to a prison chain gang and in consequence obtained a seat in the DeKalb County State Court.
And so here also we have Charles Black, he's in the yellow, and Rosalind is on the right. She's on the right. So both of them were co-founders of the Atlanta student movement, which pursued freedoms for black youth during the civil rights era. Black witnessed MLK's trial, which took place not even a mile from where we're sitting now. He himself was arrested during his time at Morehouse College for protesting against the time's pertinent racial abuse and mistreatments. Pope served also as a pioneer in the history of education and civil rights. She served as the president of the student body at Spelman College during the student movement and later went on to publish the influential essay, An Appeal for Human Rights. So thank you everybody for being here today. I'm going to start by asking, so Charles Black, in your NPR interview, you stressed the importance of racial abuses which were not always exposed in the media during the civil rights movement. A lot of people here probably aren't fully aware of those issues that weren't really exposed in the media, and so we were wondering if maybe you all could elaborate on your experiences.
Thank you very much. I want you to recognize that I'm in the proper colors at school. They were the same colors for my high school, and our mascot was a bull. So how about that? Back in the day, when we were stirring up a little trouble, this kind of an assembly would be illegal, because if blacks and whites were assembled in the same place, I'm too close to this, I guess. Blacks and whites had to sit separately, either one to one side and the other to the other side, or whites up front and blacks in the back. So you guys got locked up just for being here, you know. But you need to understand more about the tenor of the day. Everything was legally segregated. Everything. Not just lunch counters, but hotels, restaurants, but everything. Hospitals, churches, buses, you know about buses, ambulances, taxi cabs, everything was legally segregated. And our efforts were to change those things. I'm getting such a whisper from this mic, I don't know. To change those things in our time. Prior to our movement, things have been changed mostly through the courts. We have to rely on the rule of folk like the judge here to set things right. That usually took a long time. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which was euphemistically called the INC Fund, INC, would take these matters to court, and cases would be appealed and appealed, and it might take years. We were kind of impatient, so rather than evolutionary change, we were more interested in revolutionary change. Some changes in the here and now. And it's important to understand that we were the generation that came after what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. Our parents, dads, uncles, whatever, had gone overseas somewhere to fight wars to make democracy safe for America. But came back home to be called that N-word, as we say these days. Some beaten and even lynched in uniform. The black folk who had gone to make democracy safe for America. So we were born with unrest. As Dr. Bates said, born to rebel. That was the title of one of his books. And so when we were sparked by what happened in Greensboro, North Carolina, with the 4 guys sitting in at a lunch counter there, this guy named Lonnie King, who was the founding chairman of our movement, approached some of us and said, you know, this is a good idea. We can use this kind of approach to ignite some change. And so that was kind of the beginning of things. He gathered some of us up, made some plans, and he asked those who were there who would not be willing to participate, not to talk about it. Don't say anything, just go about your business. Well, somebody talked, as always is the case. The word got back to the presidents of the colleges, and they called some of us in, and made an effort to talk us out of doing this terrible thing. When they were convinced that we were going to do what they didn't want us to do, one of the presidents suggested that you ought to at least let the public know why you're doing what you're doing, and that we should publish the document. They would raise some money for an ad in a newspaper, and spelling out our discontent. There was a committee of us formed, which included myself and Julian Bond, Marge Dillard, and somebody else. And this lady over here, who is appropriately addressed as Dr. Rosa Pope, because she has 3 PhDs. She's bad, she's bad.
I can't even spell PhD.
I sometimes call her RB3 for short. But Rosin was unable to reach us on our cell phones. You know that was no such thing. You were unable to reach us on our cell phones. So the time was drawing nigh to report back to the presidents. So Rosin called Lonnie and said, you know, I'm not getting any help on this thing. And Lonnie said, well, just write the damn thing. And so she wrote the damn thing. An appeal for human rights. It appeared as a full-page ad in the local newspapers. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution were 2 papers at the time. Constitution in the morning, Journal in the afternoon. and the Atlanta Daily World, the black newspaper. It was picked up and run free of charge in the New York Times and in the LA Times. It was read into the congressional record by Senator Jacob Javits of New York. It is a historic document, and I've been talking too long.
Okay.
Did not answer anything that you asked me. Something.
Pope and Black, as founders of the Atlanta student movement, what exactly, I mean, you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but what were some of the specific things you wanted to accomplish and what obstacles did you face? And also, like, what aspects of those aspirations have you seen come to fruition since?
Well, let me say that the first obstacle that we faced was the faculty, the presidents of the colleges. We were a part of 5 colleges in Atlanta, the Atlanta University Center. And when the presidents of the colleges got wind of the idea that we were going to begin to demonstrate against segregation, they called us together to say, no, don't do that. But what came of that meeting was an agreement that we had as students that we would publish our grievances so that people would know why we were going to sit in restaurants, why we were going to go to department stores and ask to be treated like normal human beings, and why we were second class through and through. So this was in 1960, and the Appeal for Human Rights was published in March of 1960. And I'll just read the first paragraph so that you'll know what this is about. We started saying, we the students of the 6 affiliated institutions framing the Atlanta University Center, and those are Clark, Morehouse, Morris Brown, and Spelman colleges, Atlanta University, and the Interdenominational Theological Center have joined our hearts, minds, and bodies in the cause of gaining those rights which are inherently ours as members of the human race and as citizens of the United States. That was the opening. But then the appeal enumerated the areas in which we were treated as second, third, fourth, fifth class citizens, starting with education, for example, which was totally segregated. And so much more money was allotted to those schools that were a part of the white establishment, and very little to the schools that were populated by Negro students, Negroes at the time. There were discriminatory practices on jobs, certainly in housing, in voting, in hospitals, in movies, concerts, restaurants. Law enforcement was segregated. And then after enumerating those particular areas against which we were complaining, we closed by saying, we hold that the practice of racial segregation is not in keeping with the ideals of democracy and Christianity. Racial segregation is robbing not only the segregated, but the segregator of his human dignity. Furthermore, the propagation of social prejudice is unfair to the generations yet unborn. In times of war, the Negro has fought and died for his country, yet he still has not been accorded first-class citizenship. In spite of the fact that the Negro pays his share of taxes, he does not enjoy participation in city, county, and state government at the level where laws are enacted. The social, economic, and political progress of Georgia is retarded by segregation and prejudices. America is fast losing the respect of other nations by the poor example which she sets in the area of race relations. So as Charles said, this was published just before we were ready to march from the college campuses. They were all sort of in a cluster, march downtown with our signs and our requests for first-class citizenship. So I won't belabor this, but you can find the Appeal for Human Rights wherever you all go to get your information. I think you would find it instructive because you have no idea how Charles and I grew up and what we experienced before 1960 when we as students decided that change had to come.
Based on talking about your experiences, I wanted to pinpoint Mayor Wilson and also Dr. Pope. You two faced two unavoidable disparities, one being black and one being a woman. What was it like being a black woman during the civil rights era and during your work in advocacy?
And during what, I'm sorry,
And your work in your advocacy?
But being black and being female, we were supposed to be quiet. That was not part of what I wanted to do. Moving to Decatur in 1949, I was still a teenager, and Decatur was known to be Klans town. You didn't come, and you didn't drive, and you didn't live. So I don't know how I ended up being here, except that I was leaving home, and I was on a pickup truck, and all my little belongings was there. And I ended up on Sycamore Street, and at that time it truly was a square. And the guy driving the pickup truck didn't know that was a one-way street. So my introduction to Decatur was the police saying, no, 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 that's one way, you can't go. So East Court Square was my introduction not only to the city of Decatur, but to the police department. I moved down the street. So I was here when Dr. King was arrested. I was here when they brought him from Reedsville. I was at the airport. I saw him get off the plane. He was always so smartly dressed. He had on his big hat and his suit, and the sheriff was helping to escort him. And it was my friend Rosetta and I at the airport, and we thought, nobody's here, where's everybody? Dr. King is coming from prison. And when the plane landed, it was like the sea opened up, and it was a whirl of people. The buses was there, the students were there, the family was there. And Rosetta and I was there being very supportive of it. And also when they were about to have his trial up the street there, it was hard. It was hard to get into the building. So the slide that you showed, we went in on the side of the building, but I never got to the courtroom. So, and I never stopped working here in Decatur. I was lucky to actually live in the city of Atlanta. I lived in the city of Decatur, and I worked with Dr. King, Senior, Reverend Waters, and some of the students. I wanted Decatur to be the best place that we could live. I wanted to help break down the barriers that we had here, school system, public libraries, housing, and this is my beloved community.
Thank you.
It was 1962. Everything in DeKalb County, except maybe the part that's in the city of Atlanta, but everything else in the DeKalb County was still very segregated. So I had become sort of an active person. I was attending the meetings with Dr. King and Daddy King and that group. By the way, it was always the men who got the recognition of changing things. That's okay. We knew who was making the difference. But one of the meetings that I attended with the DeKalb County branch of Human Relations, and we decided at that meeting on a Sunday afternoon that we need to do something so DeKalb County would have something that we could say it was integrated. Well, guess what? It was going to be a little group of us. Come Monday morning when we made our plans, it was 2 of us. But we didn't stop, we continued to go. And we had 2, it was the 2 black ladies and 2 white ladies. One was on the outside of the building and one was on the inside of the building, just in case something happened. The outside one was in the car. She referred to it as the getaway car. So later she said, if something had happened, I would have left you. And I'm like, thanks a lot. But we went in, we saw our target on the inside of the building. We knew what to do, and we did. And after a few minutes of selecting children's books, we brought them up so we could check them out. And we were told, you can't. And we were like, why not? And they said, you have to have a card. Fine, how do we get a card? And the clerk was so very nervous because nobody knew we were coming. Even if they wanted to call the police, they didn't have time. We didn't have cell phones and all these electronic devices like we got now. They did not let us check the books out on that day. What they did was gave us an application and said, fill this out and bring it back. And we weren't sure what to do at that point, but we didn't stay there to fill it out because we lived like just down the street here. So we walked home, and we walked and Sally drove, so she didn't have to leave us in her getaway car. And so as a result, we filled out the application, brought it back, and Dorothy Scott and I, the first 2 African Americans to receive cards from Decatur to DeKalb system.
Judge Seeliger, you decided to run against Judge Oscar Mitchell, the man that sentenced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to a prison chain gang. Your campaign was entirely self-funded as no one wanted to support you or your efforts. What made you think that it was your responsibility to take this man off the bench and place yourself there?
I was crazy. Well, first of all, let me just say, what an honor it is to speak with these people. Because mighty distant valley. I was still in college in Seattle, Washington, at the University of Washington. I graduated in '63, joined the Air Force, and my first exposure to segregation in the South was in 1963 when I arrived in Biloxi, Mississippi, for training in electronics in the Air Force. The segregated waiting, I rode in my way up bus, and the segregated waiting rooms were there, the segregated fountains were there. It was a real shock because, of course, Seattle didn't have that kind of segregation. Be that as it may, after I got out of the Air Force, I came to Atlanta. I did it because of a woman, another Southern woman, and she was working at Lockheed. So I came to Atlanta and I applied to Emory Law School. Got into law school. While I was in law school, I worked on Maynard Jackson's campaign for the United States Senate. That's a lot of people don't remember that. And Maynard Jackson, who later became mayor of the city, was the first African American to run statewide since Reconstruction. It was a rough race. But anyway, we lost. Maynard later won the vice mayor race, and I worked on that campaign for him. Then he ran for mayor, but by that time I was practicing law in Decatur, so I didn't have too much to do with him. We were good friends, but he also knew that I needed to get a practice started. My involvement, to give you a little background, the DeKalb County Courthouse was all white in 1970. It was still all white in 1980. All the judges were white or lay. All the employees of the clerk's offices, the state court and superior court, were all white. The bailiffs and workers were all white. And when I finally decided to run in 1980, the only black lady who worked on the court system was really a great guy by the name of Mike Hancock, who later became a superior court judge, who was with the public defender's office in that case. In 1975, Officer Mitchell was up for re-election. About that time, I got a call from Legal Aid about a woman named Brenda White. Brenda had been charged with welfare fraud. And they asked me if I would represent her. She had no money, and I agreed to do it pro bono. Without going into too much detail, we did work out an agreement so she would go ahead and enter a plea of guilty, then she would be on probation, and pay the $600 that she ripped off the county, the state. She was a young woman, 21 years old, with 2 kids. She wasn't getting any child support, but she was getting some form of welfare. When she changed jobs, she made a little more money, but she didn't inform the authorities. Because she didn't, she picked up $600 over a period of 6 months. That was the case. We agreed to enter that plea until we would appear before the Honorable J.S. Convention that morning. And it's kind of strange that they called us to say, they called us the lawyers and defendants, come on in at 10 o'clock so we can do the plea. So we came in, and Brenda entered her plea of guilty. And the recommendation of the state and ours, as we negotiated the plea, was explained to the judge. And then the judge got started. Said, you people on welfare, you people this, you people that. He used just about every epithet you can think of, and forgive me for using it, except the negative one. But everything that you could possibly cite, he cited. That by the time he got through with his tirade, my client, Brenda, was sitting next to me. She was in tears. She's 21 years old. She didn't do anything wrong. And this bastard went after me. I was angry. I later found out it was a set-up job. The reason why they set the plea at 10 o'clock is because he was up for re-election. The newspaper he called and said, I wanted to make a statement against welfare fraud, so he could be tough on welfare. 5 years later, I decided I'd run against him. Now, again, as I mentioned, the courthouse was entirely white. Even though 35 to 37% of the people who lived in this county were African American, they weren't represented in the courthouse. So I launched the campaign. The campaign, I did not stand much of a chance. The lawyers in the Bar Association lined up behind Judge Mitchell. The Democratic Party, and I had to run a Democratic primary, all the leadership of the Democratic Party lined up against me. I was supported by people like Manuel Wolf, who later the Chief Executive Officer. I can't remember the sheriff, and a couple other people lined up who were leaders in the Democratic Party. So we ran, and there was a third person in the race by the name of Jim Goggins. Really a nice guy. I never figured out why he ran, because he didn't really campaign all that time. But anyway, he campaigned, talked about his reversal record, and how Oscar conducted himself in court. He did not issue the issue of race at that point during the campaign. But it was implied all over the place the way he treated black people. Everybody knew it. So be that as it may, the primary came up. And when the primary came up, Oscar got 45% of the vote and I got 42%, which was bad news for Judge Mitchell, because it meant the people who voted for Jim Goggins, about 10% of the electorate, would end up voting for the challenger because they didn't like Oscar anyway. And that's what happened. I won. And that was important. When I first got into the courthouse, before that, I over here in Church Street, or not Church Street, but Maple Street, I used to had a little house that I had where I kept my office. And a young lawyer by the name of Dwight Thomas came by, African American. He wanted to rent space for me, and I said, sure, and he did. He had a father. His name was Nesby Thomas, who worked out there for GM. He came by, and I met him because when Dwight moved in, the family came in and helped him decorate his office. And Nesby came up and asked me, Judge, I'd like to be your bailiff. And I said, well, that's a good slot. He's a tall, upstanding, good-looking guy, pretty responsible. So I said, I'd hire him. Of course, he was African American. He was the first African American bailiff to be hired in the courthouse. So we took off. When I took office, he was there. About 2 weeks later, after being on the bench, I discovered there was a flag in the courtroom. I thought it was 2 Georgia flags. One was the Georgia flag, which had the stars and bars on it. I couldn't get rid of that. That's a symbol of the state. But the other was a Confederate battle flag. And Judge Mitchell used to drape that flag over the entrance to his courtroom on Robert E. Lee's birthday and on the Confederate Memorial Day. That's how it got there. It was just sitting there. So the next morning, I talked to Nesby, and I said, Nesby, we're going to have to get that flag out of here. Would you mind doing that? He said, my pleasure. I'll be glad to do that. And so when I came on the bench, I said, the Confederate battle flag used to be a symbol of a flag of honor, but now it represents an attitude toward race. Therefore, it should not be in the courtroom. And they removed it. That's all I said. The reporter was there, but he didn't give as much of a story. He said, are you going to say anything else? I said, no. Okay, I'm writing it. And I forgot about it. Then about 1 o'clock, as I was coming back from lunch, I ran into this young African-American guy with cameras, a photographer. He came up to me and he said, you're Judge Segregating? I said, yeah. Well, I just took a picture of your bailiff with the flag. Do you mind? I was got completely off guard. I said, no, I don't see anything wrong with that. That's fine. And as he went to the elevator, he looked at me and he said, Judge? I said, yeah. Thank you. He had tears in his eyes. But anyway, by noon of the next day, the Atlanta Journal came out with this afternoon paper, and it was front page news. New DeKalb judge banishes Confederate flag. And it had a picture with Nesby, an African-American, holding the Confederate flag. And the calls started calling. Some were complimentary, some people that I knew. A lot of them were not. But one of the things that happened is we got all kinds of publicity. I got calls from Seattle and other places, but friends of mine said it was on NBC News. I had no idea it was doing that coverage. But be that as it may, there was a paper called The Thunderbolt, operated by J.B. Stoner, that's what it was. And Thunderbolt, it was a racist newspaper that was sent all over the country from Marietta. And so they put the picture that was in the Constitution on the front page of their newsletter. Then they put my name, my home address, and my home phone number on the front page. Boy, did I get mail after that, including one death threat. When I got the death threat, that was turned over to the FBI. And they eventually did prosecute him, although I didn't know anything about it. Eventually that would die down. One of the most interesting things I discovered in talking with Mr. Warren was about Jack Smith. Jack Smith is the chief judge now of the state court. There are 3 judges, and that was the junior one. But he was the prosecutor of Dr. King before Judge Mitchell during the brouhaha about his driver's license and he went to Reidsville. When I went to see Jack, I said, Jack had, it wasn't for that particular incident, he had quite a record. He was the bombardier in World War II on B-17s, kind of a hero. But anyway, I walked up to him and said, Jack, look, 37% of the county is African American. We need some black employees. We've got to reflect the community that we represent in the courthouse. And true to his word, he said, I'll do it. And by the time I left the state court, when I ran for Superior Court in London, 20% of the employees in state court were now African American. He did it. Wild stories having nothing to do with race relations since I became a Superior Court judge. But it's an honor to be with these people. They were fighting the fight before I got here. And I helped a little bit. I'm grateful I had that opportunity. Thank you.
So today we're essentially here because not only is it Black History Month, and this is an important topic, but we're also, me and Genesis and Lisa, Addie, Jackson, we're trying to get a historical marker for the MLK trial to happen here to get placed in DeKalb County. So our last question would be, in what ways do you think that marking major events such as King's trial here could continue positive change in the area?
And nobody can answer.
You got the microphone.
When Mr. Warren presented that idea to me, I thought about it, because we've got all kinds of markers in this Decatur, including that one in front of the old DeKalb courthouse, which now has a sign behind it, talking about how that pillar during the Reconstruction, after the Reconstruction period was put on. I think it'd be a great idea. First of all, historically, that was a turning point in history. I still remember these because I read about it in Seattle, about how Dr. King, imprisonment was intervened by John Kennedy, and that did turn everything around. And I still remember when I came down here working on a campaign for mayor, John C. Calhoun was running for city council. He's a pretty gracious black man. He indicated to me that he indicated to me he was a Republican. I'm very proud of the fact. He went to the city, was a delegate for Dwight David Eisenhower in the 1956 presidential election. As we now know, over 90% of African Americans generally vote for Democrats. And that all started because of what happened here and the black community's reaction to what happened here.
I think it would be very appropriate to have a marker here in the city of Decatur, and especially on the site where Dr. King was tried, or at least was in jail. I know it's hard for you to believe, but the jail used to be on the corner there, across from Chick-fil-A. And if you can imagine, you know, the jail is here on the top of this building, you know, and office was lower, and they had two entrances, one in the front and one on the side. And so when they brought Dr. King in, they got something that they brought him in, so you didn't necessarily see all of him. But he was being rushed upstairs. We have developed a lot in Decatur, but I believe that we can have the marker in the spot where the jail was, in the between the sidewalk and the street. So it'll be on the location where Dr. King was. And we don't have a street or a park or anything in the city of Decatur honoring Dr. King with his name. So, good luck. I'm with you 100% of doing whatever I can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To note that that marker has extreme historical significance because when King was arrested and put in jail, and the Kennedy campaign intervened to get him out, that made the difference in that election that year. Kennedy and Nixon were running. This was 2 weeks before the election, okay? Nixon was leading by double digits 2 weeks before the election. When this action took place, the Kennedy campaign published something called the Blue Bomb. It was called on blue paper. And Danny King, Coretta Abernathy, and I think Junior as well, had statements in there encouraging people to support Kennedy. And this was distributed in large numbers in all the major cities that had large black populations. And all of those cities switched from Republican to Democrat and elected Kennedy, except for one major city, Atlanta. And the reason Atlanta stayed in the Republican Party was because of this guy you just mentioned, John Calhoun, who was the penultimate organizer, the community organizer. And he kept the black community mostly in the Republican cloud that year. But that event that took place in that courthouse on that day, I was there when it happened. Let me tell you what, I was in the courtroom. The judge sat sideways in his chair at the bench with a comic book, flipping pages, while Don Hollowell was presenting the case in defense of King. And when he finished, when Hollowell finished, the judge just turned around and said, "You through?" Boom, 4 minutes. I witnessed that personally. But that event made the difference in the election of Kennedy over Nixon and the course of history because of it.
We really appreciate you guys coming out, and we really appreciate the panelists, you guys sharing your stories and really educating us on so much that's happened in our city and in Atlanta. And we just want to leave you guys with a message to always fight for what you believe in and to always go through your lives and through your futures with love and understanding and always trying to be the best people that you can be. So we would like to give some thanks today.
She's bringing flowers for the panelists. Thanks, Jesse, Charles Black, and thank you, Morehouse, for helping us in our research of this event. And then we'd like to thank Michael for being a part of this project as well. And Mr. Haskell for letting us have this event. Thank you.